Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined tonight for a review of the first half of 2019 by the other regular host of Scotland at 7, Gordon Ross.
Hello.
And we're also joined here at the table by two of our favourite regular guests. We have Chris McCusker on one side of me and Day Tucker at the other end of the table rather. So we start in January, folks, and at Westminster, January's major highlight came from the famed meaningful vote on Theresa May's Brexit deal. May lost that vote by 432 votes to 202, but then immediately won a no-confidence vote brought by Jeremy Corbyn. She then came back with an almost identical plan for a second meaningful vote on January 29th. Of course, she lost that one too. Across the pond, the new Congress was sworn in following the midterm elections. A record number of women were elected to the House of Representatives for a grand total of 24% of the seats. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib became the first Muslim women ever elected to Congress. Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland became the first Native American women elected to Congress. And most famously of all, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez became the youngest woman elected to Congress at just 29 years old. Meanwhile, the British government displayed its reputation for competence when issuing contracts for ferries to help manage the Brexit chaos, as it gave one contract to a company that owned no ships, had no experience in ferry operations, and used cut and pasted text from a takeaway pizza place for its terms and conditions. We started the year with a bang, really, didn't we, Gordon? What's your abiding memory of any of that?
Well, I have to be honest with you, I just never believed in ferries anyway, right from the beginning when they started mentioning the fact that they were going to have more ferries. The idea of ferries being at the bottom of somebody's garden immediately sprang to my mind when you mentioned this. So, but only was it Chris Grayling who was in charge of that?
It was Chris Grayling.
Yeah. The famous Failing Grayling,
yes.
the man who has the Medusa touch. Everything he touches basically turns to nothing, turns to rock. Yes, an amazing piece of incompetence. Mm-hmm. I mean, only a man like Mr. Grayling could come up with something as crazy as giving a major government contract to, I think it was a relative of his,
I think
or a
so,
cousin or an uncle who had an interest in this particular supposed shipping company, but it turned out not to be a shipping company, but a freight forwarding operation operating from a small harbour.
Yeah. Well, not only that,
I think it was Ramsgate.
It
was Ramsgate.
But they famously didn't pay any berthing dues on the other side of the channel to the French Ports Authority. They hadn't even paid any berthing fees and stuff like that. So where were the ships if they got them?
I think it was all stand. I don't think it was France.
Was it all stand?
But
but basically they hadn't paid that, so the ships had nowhere to dock. Even if they got the ships in the first place.
So they could maybe take them across there and just
throw them out
over the side and say swim for them.
There you go.
A classic piece of British Dunkirk spirit, I think you would call it, but in reverse, instead of rescuing people from the beaches, they're going to throw them out.
It could have honestly have been scripted by Monty Python, do you know what I mean? It was just so ridiculous, it was unreal.
I mean, that's kind of the story of Brexit generally.
Like I was just thinking that.
We had a meaningful vote that was supposed to, settle things, and then a couple of weeks later, we'll have the meaningful vote now, and that wasn't even the last meaningful vote.
Yes.
I mean, Day, what was your takeaway from that whole period?
Well, it was almost like the unpreparedness of Brexit by the Johnson lot, Mark II, because it was all on paper, but the practicalities of it hadn't really sunk in.
Did you not think that it sounded as though they were just making it up as they went
Absolutely.
along? That they never actually expected there to be an emergency in which they might need to do this?
Yes.
And therefore they just said, hurry up, think of something quick.
It's almost as if they thought Brexit wouldn't happen, so we'll just play the game and pretend we're really preparing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even in Parliament, we'll come to more of the chaos in Parliament as we go on, but it just seemed to me like nobody really wanted to make a decision.
Uh-huh.
You know, that there were clear things that had to be done.
Yeah.
But people were so afraid of some of the political consequences that they felt like that there wasn't really any room for them to move.
That's right.
And so we ended up with this farce, these meaningful votes that we knew were going to fail, and yet we were still supposed to pretend that somehow they meant something.
I think that was the characteristic of the whole year, was this air of unreality
Yeah.
about everything that they did,
Yes.
that nobody believed that any of this was actually going to
Going to
transpire at all.
Yes. Well,
So-
David Cameron never thought it would happen, did he?
Yeah,
to
I
the
mean,
start.
I thought it characterised it a few months ago as, you know, sort of rabbit hole politics, where
Yes.
you have fallen down the rabbit hole with Alice,
Yeah.
and you're at the, you know, you're at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party,
Yeah. Which is
and
what
nothing.
how Ken Clark characterised it in
Did he?
Parliament. Oh yes, did you
Okay.
not know that?
I give credit to where it's due. Ken Clark sounds like he's probably the only sane politician in the chamber.
Yeah.
Well, certainly the
with
only-
exception of Dominic Grieve,
I was
of
gonna
course.
say,
certainly
Dominic Grieve, maybe, yeah.
And Michael Heseltine.
Yes, poor old Michael Heseltine. He always looked like he was on the verge of having a stroke, and who can blame him?
Yeah,
frankly?
I mean, I think 2019 has been a real kind of a really surreal year in that sense that I'm now looking at John Major and going, God, he was quite a good Prime Minister, wasn't he? Kind of knew what he was doing,
And yet
you
we
know.
used to call him the grey man
Yeah.
of politics
Yeah.
because he was
Yeah.
so colourless and bland.
Yeah.
Aye.
And
But even since
Apart from that bit with it being a
Boris
curry.
Johnson got in, people are looking back and thinking maybe Theresa May wasn't too bad. I mean, how bad is that?
But you see, an awful lot of people are now comparing to, an awful lot of people are now saying, compared to Johnson's premiership, Thatcher's was a walk in the park.
Yeah.
And then when you've got people saying that Thatcher
Wasn't that bad.
Thatcher wasn't
Yes.
so
and
bad.
especially now that you've got Labour constituencies in the north of England,
Yes.
hard mining communities
Yes.
that are actually, you know, disregarding their grandmother, their grandfather's wishes, and all
Yeah.
the rest of it.
Yeah.
Staunch Labour, and just happily to get roll over and have
Yeah.
their belly tickled.
Yes. Yes.
It's absolutely astounding. I
Yeah.
never thought I would see that in my
No.
lifetime.
Yeah.
And now, just before we move on to talk about February, I do just want to highlight 24% of women in the US House of Representatives, and that's an all-time record. I mean, it's good always, I think, to see more women coming into politics, but 24% in the biggest, richest, most powerful country in the world. Still never had a female president. Still had only a very small number of women in the really powerful positions. I mean, Dea, I suppose you're the obvious person to ask. How do you feel about just this issue of women still being so underrepresented that 24% is considered a triumph?
Yes, well, I consider it a triumph because they've had to come such a long way. And that's what we have to remember. We're talking about centuries of, pushing women to one side and they're not bright enough or they're not capable, etc. No, I'm happy with that. 24%. You
And
know.
also the one chance they had of electing a female president, they rejected her for Donald Trump.
Yes, but were there not reasons for that?
Trump sort of like,
There
tried to
was
drag up various reasons
Yes.
in order that she shouldn't get put in.
That's
But
right.
It's
I
kind
think the parallels that we're looking at, your typical American housewife of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, she stays home to look after the kids.
That's
and,
right.
You know, and hubby goes out to work and all the rest of it. You know, and it was all depicted, behind those white picket fences, the
Yes.
2.4 children, and you know.
That's
But
right.
at the centre core running through that, you still have pretty much a right-wing government running.
It's a very
that country.
misogynistic place, America. We
Yes.
don't realise it. I mean, I visited America a few times, and a couple of things struck me as remarkable. There's an amazing can-do attitude amongst people in business, but
Yeah.
it doesn't translate to women in business or women in politics or black people in business or
Yeah.
black people in politics.
Yeah.
It's always white men, and usually it's old white men
Yes.
Yeah,
who are very wealthy
Yes.
Yeah.
because they're the only ones who are able to afford a political campaign.
Yes. And you,
Hence we
you,
end up with somebody like Mr.
contrast
Trump.
that with Iceland
yeah.
and their
Yep.
latest appointments of these young women, you know, right at the top of government.
Or Scotland, for
Or
that
Scotland,
matter. I
yes.
mean, there's a great number of women politicians.
Any Scandinavian country.
Although in fairness, we should say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, they're known as the Squad. And you know, these four women, all from minorities, have really exerted a significant force by kind of ganging together.
Yes.
And they've really made a mark on politics. They raised money a different way, raised money from their constituents rather than from these big money donors
Yes.
that you're talking about.
And she is
and they've,
so
and they
clever.
have had so much blowback from Trump. They've clearly got under his skin. So they must be doing something right in my.
Absolutely.
Trump hates powerful women.
Yes.
He really doesn't like
Yeah.
women who are even anywhere near his equal.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think Trump hates almost everybody who isn't
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Yes. Yes.
Well, with the exception of Nigel Farage. Allegedly.
Anyway, I think we do have to roll on a wee bit. So will we have a wee look at February?
Well,
then?
okay, is it my turn now?
It is your turn.
It's
yeah.
my turn now. Okay, well, in February, Theresa May went back to the drawing board with her Brexit plans. The Scottish Government was getting on with the day job. The Scottish budget passed with the support of the Greens and included provision for councils to levy a tourist tax to enable places like Edinburgh to harvest revenue from their huge tourism industry to support overworked infrastructure in the city. In Glasgow, the long-standing equal pay claims of large numbers of women employed by the City Council were finally settled. Now, this battle had been ongoing for over a decade in some cases, against fierce resistance from the Labour-controlled council. When the SNP took control of Glasgow in 2017, resolving these pay claims became a very high priority. So something quite dramatic happened in Glasgow at that time. Now, on the other side of the Atlantic, Donald Trump gave a typically lucid State of the Union address. He also withdrew the United States INF, which is the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia, and this prompted Russia to withdraw too, with Putin immediately announcing that Russia would begin developing new nuclear weapons. Mikhail Gorbachev, the former president of the USSR, described Trump's decision as not the work of a great mind. I think that's damned with faint praise. And back in Europe, the Catalan political prisoners held on apparently trumped-up charges, if you'll pardon the pun, related to organising the 2017 referendum on Catalan independence, were moved from Barcelona to Madrid to begin what turned out to be essentially a show trial. And we are still feeling the ramifications of that process in Scotland today. So here we have two very different scenarios. Well, if we take things from the beginning, I mean, we know what happened with Theresa May. But while she was going through the motions with her meaningful votes, the Scottish Government's getting on with its day job.
Yes.
Now, this business of the massive women's pay imbalance in Glasgow City Council.
Yeah, well, I was just actually, I was saying to Kenny that I actually disagree that it was ongoing for a decade.
10 years the women have been fighting for equal pay.
30 years that the Labour Council
Resisted
avoided
it. Yeah.
paying it and spent a vast amount of money in the courts trying to avoid paying out. I actually resigned from the GMB as a union officer because of the GMB's stance on it. You know, I fell out of it. I fell out with Richard Leonard when he accidentally got elected as leader of the Scottish Labour. Easy to do, but yeah, I had some words with fellow comrades in the trade union movement, and I just
Can
just couldn't. I just couldn't go on.
Can I ask you one question, Chris, about this? It's always puzzled me. What was Glasgow City Council's objection to women having equal pay? Did they just not want to pay the money,
They just
or were
didn't want to
they
pay the
scared they
money.
were going to have to lower the wages of the men?
No, I don't think it was that. Essentially, I think it was just the fact that the Glasgow Council under the Labour control had mismanaged the finances.
So they didn't have the money to
And
pay
they
them, in
didn't-
other words.
they didn't have the money to pay it. They at the same time they underfunded quite a lot of public buildings as well. And by the time that the SNP took over, we actually found out how bad some of the public buildings were left. You only have to look at the Winter Gardens and the People's Palace. And I find it laughable, although the last Lord Provost of Glasgow came under a lot of scrutiny for their handbag purchasing and stuff like that, and their shoes. But to be fair, they were still under the required level. However extravagant it wasn't as extravagant as some of the Lord Provosts in days gone by.
I remember the days where they would be jetting off to the Bahamas on fact-finding missions for a couple of weeks.
Also, you
half a
had
dozen of them.
also you had the Provost. I can't. Was it Jim Kelly?
James Kelly, the one, Smiley Scotland,
Yes.
Smiley Glasgow.
Well, he
Glasgow
actually,
smiles better.
actually, I could tell you a
That was a
story
good
about
campaign, I
that.
thought.
I could tell you a story about that.
Is this a legal story?
This
we can't tell
is a
legally?
legal story. He actually see that Glasgow Smiles Better image.
Yeah.
My elder brother designed that when he was in ProScot, and he owned
Michael
ProScot, that Michael Kelly, and he actually took that off my brother's desk
Really?
and claimed it as his own.
It's so hard to prove something like that as well when it happens.
Yeah. My elder brother's running his own PR house out in Melbourne now.
Yeah.
What the other side of the coin is the fact that he was Provost, and he had heavy business interests in Celtic Football Club at the time as well. And there was an awful lot of money swirling around. And
We should just say that whatever Chris may know personally about such an issue, as Broadcasting Scotland, we are not confirming or denying any such story.
no, that's fine. The McCusker family will happily get taken to court. We don't have anything.
Broadcasting Scotland dissociates itself entirely from Chris's words, however much we might normally trust him. We just don't want to get sued.
Not that much, usually, yes. Well, listen, let's bring things back to, just for a moment, back to Donald Trump and him pulling out of this ballistic missile treaty. This struck me as rather typical of Trump's current policy, which is to pull back American forces from all of the theatres that they're currently in. But including strategic nuclear missiles seemed an odd one, even for Donald.
I think any world leader who's pulling out of these nuclear weapons agreements is a lunatic. I mean, it took decades, going back as far as Nixon and Khrushchev.
Strategic arms limitation talks.
All the way up through Gorbachev and Reagan. I mean, that was kind of one of the defining parts of my childhood was like, we might not all die in a nuclear war.
Well, even Reagan nearly blew it as well with his Star Wars program, because he wanted to put weapons in space, which was actually illegal under the Outer Space Treaty.
Donald Trump's trying to do that now. He's establishing his space force.
Yes.
But this idea that he can step back from that he can withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, and basically say to Iran, fine, build nukes if you want.
But Trump seems to be following a pattern of withdrawing.
Yeah.
He seems to be withdrawing from everything that he doesn't like, including the climate change. The Paris Climate Agreement, he's withdrawn from that as well. It's as if, anything that it doesn't fit into the Donald Trump world is basically just removed
But
from his side.
again, Trump just thinks that he can do things his way and get away with it.
Well, there is
And I think there's, you know, very much of a sort of like a poker approach to his politics. It's an awful lot of, you know,
there's also his pre-election promises where he pledged to bring American troops home from the Gulf arena, and he's been doing that. But he shocked everybody when he pulled the American troops out of Syria, pulled the American forces back. Which basically allowed Russian forces in, which destabilised things even further. I think a lot of people
literally
were
within hours.
I think one of the big problems is that he makes these decisions kind of like that, and there doesn't seem to be a big circle of discussion and how are we going to do this and how can we make this work smoothly.
Well, he also unfortunately sabotaged the talks between American officials and the Taliban to settle the fighting in Afghanistan, and they're only now today actually managing to reconvene these peace talks with Americans and the Taliban. But they're now having to guarantee a ceasefire because Trump lost his cool because one American soldier was killed by an IED just before the talks were about to happen, and he had a fit of pique and cancelled the whole thing. And so, you know, the man has a whim of iron. Basically, it's just whatever he feels like doing happens, you know.
But I also think that Kenny made quite a salient point about the fact that there is no, what you would call in America as due process.
No.
No
discussion, no planning,
seems to do it on
no
a whim.
strategy.
You know, and just whenever it takes his fancy, you know, if that's what he wants to do, and that's what he wants to do, without actually thinking through the actual the ramifications for doing so. And then waking up the next morning and finding out what the ramifications are and saying, well, it doesn't matter because I've done it now anyway.
Well, talking of ramifications brings us back to this issue of the Catalan political prisoners. And something which sprang to my mind when I was reading this was something which Nicola Sturgeon said recently when she was saying that she wanted the Scottish independence campaign and the search for the legal method of obtaining that, so that we wouldn't have a Catalan situation, that it wouldn't be conflated with that, despite the fact that Scotland has a completely different constitutional arrangement and a constitutional history from Catalonia. But I think Nicola was worried that the way the Catalans were treated by Spain is the way that the British media will treat us.
Would treat Scotland,
But I think that's right.
How would the Europeans view us if we tried to have a referendum which isn't by agreement?
Yeah, I think not for once, but she really is now on the front foot, whereas we've been on the back foot a lot of the time. And this is her getting in there first and mentioning Catalonia and saying, now don't you know, to Boris, don't you try this with us because we're not going to be doing anything illegal. And Mike Russell, when he was on here with us that time, he was quite adamant that we just had to stay calm and it will happen, and it will happen because of political will. He didn't say whose political will.
One thing that's interesting, and somebody pointed this out to me in a post today on Facebook, is the fact that despite the Conservative government and Number 10 making all sorts of negative statements about Nicola's request for the Section 30 order, Boris Johnson has not actually replied to it yet. He has not said no yet. And he seems to be taking a long time to decide what to say.
Well, I mean, that's the British media have said no.
The question in my mind
is, the MPs have said no.
The question in my mind is, why is Boris hesitating about this when he has been so clear that he's against it?
Well, that is a question for another day, because that's news. That's not reviewing the year, which is what we're
asking a question.
Trying to do just now. I'm sure we will continue to talk about just
Kenny,
that very question.
It's time for Mad March now.
It is. We are moving on to March now. In March, Europe held its breath as the UK appeared ready to leave the EU without any agreement in place. After votes to reject the deal and votes to insist there couldn't be a no-deal scenario, a delay was eventually agreed. In the frenzy that surrounded these discussions, Westminster became a site of permanent protest by both sides of the Brexit debate, and several MPs, especially pro-Remain women, were targeted with threats and abuse in person and online from the growing tide of angry English nationalism. Meanwhile, Shamima Begum, the young woman who left the UK as a teenager to join ISIS, was refused the right to come home. On International Women's Day, Begum lost her third child while still in a refugee camp, thousands of miles from her home and family. In New Zealand, 2 mosques in Christchurch were attacked by a single gunman in the worst mass shooting in modern New Zealand history. 51 people were murdered and 49 injured. The shootings were live streamed on Facebook and have been linked to growing white supremacist activity in New Zealand and around the world. In the US, the Mueller report was finally published, showing that Russia did interfere in the 2016 presidential campaign and that the Trump campaign had welcomed that interference, but that it had been impossible to secure evidence of collusion. However, the report also highlighted several instances of Trump and his cronies obstructing the investigation by deleting communications and refusing to give evidence. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky won the presidential election there. This would turn out to be pretty important for Donald Trump later in the year. And so, first, I mean, the story here that really shocked me was the Shamima Begum. I believe she was 15 years old when she left the UK. Not even legally an adult. She was married into ISIS, presumably not in a particularly happy wedding. She had 3 children, lost the first 2. When she was pregnant with the third, she decided it was time to come home. And she was refused to be allowed to come home. Effectively, she was made stateless, which is a crime under international human rights law. She lost that child, who was a British citizen by right as well, and didn't have access to the NHS and all the comforts of home. She was in a refugee camp in Jordan. And this, to me, was just one of the worst examples of what the British government has been doing to all kinds of immigrants, asylum seekers, and then to do this. I mean, this was a British citizen. They couldn't pretend that this wasn't their responsibility.
And also, I suppose it was a child in one sense. So they picked on the weakest, most vulnerable sort of person they could to make an example out of her.
They used it as a political weapon because it was playing into the hands.
There is a train of thought that if you are a very right-wing minded person, that if you want to stop people from doing something, you pick on the weakest, most vulnerable person and you bully them to death, because then people will think that, well, if you can be such a swine to such an innocent or you know a non-combatant, a wee lassie basically who got herself pregnant, she was misguided enough to allow herself to be taken over to a war zone and lost 3 children, and yet the British government is monstering her as though she was some kind of terrorist.
Yeah, but the bigger question here is the fact that you know she was offered no help, and the fact that the UK government were I would suggest that they were lax in the protocols that allowed her to research the radicalisation that she obviously underwent in order to go at the age of 15.
The thing is that Christie could have brought her back to the UK, and she could have been imprisoned, and she could have been part of a de-radicalisation programme in prison, and her child could have come with her. She would still have been punished. She would still have been rehabilitated.
Whereas now she just becomes an advert for how awful the British government is and how much it hates Muslims.
But only to right-minded people.
How inhospitable
she was used as a political tool.
Yes.
You know.
And funnily enough, this is actually not the Begum case in itself, but that it's now manifested itself that Boris is in now. One of the first acts of his modern government, his new government, his one nation conservatism, is that he is going to renege on the Dubs Amendment.
Yes.
Which means the unaccompanied minors in the camps will not be allowed to join up with family members in Britain, and they have just been consigned to a life of misery and
Exploitation.
Yeah.
exploitation, basically, you know, with some of the most horrendous conditions that you could ever imagine.
Well, I mean, this is I think part of this, what we mentioned about around Brexit, is this kind of growing English nationalism. This sense that that I think kind of underlies a lot of Brexit is this idea that England is special. England has not been treated with the respect that it deserves, both by people in the country and by all the varied forces outside. And people are very, very angry about it. And I think that has expressed itself as a fear of foreigners and kind of hatred of immigrants, and particularly, I think, Islamophobia, I think, has been a big, big
But
part of it.
This has been spiked by, you know, Nigel Farage, people like that, who have sort of like reignited this ideology of empire. That people feel that you know they're emboldening this Englishman and his castle routine. You know that we've been you know basically. I hate to use a colourful language, but I always do. But shat upon for such a long time by the EU bureaucrats that you know we want to, in inverted commas, take back control and you know, but they don't actually understand. And I made the point the last time. I'm not saying that English people or English voters are stupid, but they've been sold a pup.
But they've also been heavily propagandised for decades by year upon year of right-wing, you know, jingoistic journalism from the likes of the Daily Mail, which basically makes out that anybody who isn't white is bad.
In doing that is Boris Johnson himself. His whole, when he was the journalist over there, it was all about how bad the EU was.
Oh yeah, I mean Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage have radicalised something like 52% of the UK.
Yes.
But then again, harken back to the last show that I was on with Kenny. Kenny made the point that if you look at the three right-wing governments throughout the world, you know, what is the common denominator behind them all? And it is newspaper moguls.
Yes.
If you look at Britain, you've got Murdoch. If you look at Australia,
Murdoch.
you've still got Murdoch. And then if you look at Trump, who have you got?
There's an interesting fact that was pointed out to me last week, which is that only 3 countries in the entire world consistently elect right-wing governments. The United States of America, Australia and the UK. And the one thing they all have in common is News Corp. News Corp. That one news organisation is the only common denominator among the 3 of them, apart from the sort of general fact that they all speak English and they kind of are part of what used to be the British Empire. But this one thing, this one news corporation,
that's interesting.
it's a fascinating observation.
See, just totally aside, they were talking about they were celebrating, what was it, 30 years of The Simpsons this week, right? And they were looking at The Simpsons and saying how prophetic it was in predicting the future.
Yeah, that all these orange people were going to be ruling the world.
All these orange people and stuff like that, yeah. But then, see if you look at, you know, what we were talking about there, about News Corp and stuff like that and all the rest of it. If you look back at one of the James Bond films, one of the villains in that was a guy who was... He was wanting to make the news headlines.
He was a media mogul.
He was a media mogul, and he was, you know, looking at world domination and, and all the rest of it.
He was starting wars so that he could
And he was
report on
starting
them.
wars so that he could report on them, so he could get ahead of his journalistic chums.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, we are just you know, these are not precise allegations against anyone in particular.
No, we just add the
don't-
word
we do
alleged
not
to
want
everything
to
that
get
we
sued
say.
by News Corp.
Yeah, but wait a minute, Barbara Broccoli, that's where the buck stops.
No, I
This
think-
isn't coming for Chris McCusker. It's Barbara Broccoli that I'm blame.
Well, as well as all of that, of course, we've got the fact that Vladimir Zelensky, who was elected as the president of Ukraine, is a former comedian.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
And he
yes.
ends up being, as we find out later on this year, a part of Donald Trump's miseries now, just by a strange quirk of fate almost. Donald decides to use him.
Yeah, he had played.
He played the
Uh-huh.
president.
Yeah.
He pretended to be a president, and then he became one.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's-
Donald Trump didn't even get the chance to practice first. He just got
It's-
made president.
yeah,
you know?
I mean, it's-
maybe that's what's wrong with him.
It is a very weird thing. I mean, I don't know enough about Ukraine to know what that election must have been like, but we've seen similar things in Italy. We've seen comedians. There's a party called The Party in Germany, which
Zelensky
is
is
by
widely,
comedians as
Zelensky is
well.
widely regarded as a good guy
Sure.
in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Well,
it's-
maybe we'll
it's
get
just
Hugh Grant as president down south.
My goodness. No.
get Billy
Not
Connolly
president,
for
Prime
Prime
Minister.
Minister.
I'll get right behind that. Get the big, you know.
Maybe Frankie Boyle, given the mood I've been in Milan
Oh.
this year.
But listen, is it my turn again?
I think
to do
it is.
April?
Just
Right,
Just
okay.
before you move
We're
off
going
from
to.
just before you move off from Ukraine, I seen something this week that Boris has gone out to serve Christmas dinner to the British troops that are there.
Oh, really?
What's that all about?
Yes.
One thing I've also, sorry, somebody just reminded me that the one thing we didn't mention about March was that was when Brexit was supposed to happen. We were
Oh,
so
yeah.
busy talking about everything else we forgot. Brexit was meant to happen at the end of March.
Was it?
Yeah, 31st
So,
of
you
March.
must have missed that bit, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing, the whole Brexit thing, was just mental. I mean, really, just
Well-
I remember in March, kind of thinking, it's going to happen, isn't it? They're going to just
You could
let
com-
us fall out of the EU, and I was convinced at that point that it was going to happen.
I said a while ago that you could compare Brexit to a Bearsden bungalow. It's had that many extensions on it. And it's pretty much the way it's gone. I mean, there we were at the end of March, and they said, well, you can have an extension until, what was it, May? Was it end of May? Anyway, this brings us up to April so far. We've not got very far, actually, have we, in this great
No,
year's troll? Anyway, April, here we are in April, and a series of indicative votes were held at Westminster to try and find a path to parliamentary compromise. In a typical display of Westminster efficiency, all four options failed to win a majority. The EU summit on April the 10th, though, the EU 27 did agree to a delay. As if there hadn't been enough of a horror show already, Brexit was postponed until Halloween.
How appropriate.
Halloween just seemed to be such an appropriate time for
It
it.
could have actually been scripted by John Landis.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, the downside of this month was that also in London, Julian Assange finally, they say he left the Ecuadorian embassy. He was carried kicking and screaming head first out of the Ecuadorian embassy, where he had lived since claiming asylum in 2012. He was subsequently charged with breaching bail following his failure to appear in court in 2012 regarding his extradition to Sweden. The charges for this, which have now been dropped. So he is now in solitary confinement, finishing off a 50-week term in solitary confinement for a breach of bail. It just seems absolutely incredible.
Well, again, it's just, I think that they've put this on there so that they can do, another bit of digging to see if they can find if there's something that they can actually legally hold them on.
Yeah, I think
what-
America certainly wants to get a hold of him.
Yeah, but the other side of the coin as well is that whilst Sweden would obviously want something to come out of it, something with a bit of meat on the bones. I think Kenny's quite right in saying that America have got more of a bone in it than what Sweden have.
Yeah.
America are claiming that Assange is guilty of espionage, that he colluded with what's his name, Snowden? Was
Yeah.
it Snowden?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
whistleblower. To actually break into computer records. That was what they were claiming he was guilty of.
Right, but then again, you can draw parallels with the Murdoch Empire. How many times did they break
Yes.
into sensitive
If-
information and and have their journalists breaking into dead girls'
Yeah,
phones and
phones.
stuff like that?
Well,
and all the
apparently,
rest of it?
if Julian Assange were extradited and if he were found guilty of espionage, the penalty for this is 175 years in jail.
In
170
America, is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would likely
So
be in
uncivilised.
It would
high
prob-
security,
yeah, It would
probably.
probably be 10 years, but it would feel like 175 probably.
Yeah.
But Belmarsh is no picnic. I mean, he's in solitary confinement 23 hours a day.
Yeah, it's,
So
it's fairly.
somebody
horrific.
said he might have been treated better if he'd gone to Sweden.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
But who knows? I mean,
Well,
there's
at
probably
least
more chance of him being extradited
Sweden-
from here to the US.
Yeah,
than
but
from there.
I mean, Sweden's obviously got a better record on human rights as opposed to what
does.
So either Britain or the
Britain
US
or the
has.
US, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a story, and we will obviously have to wait and see if the US just suddenly decides that it can, that it does
Well,
want
the thing is,
to,
what happens when
to pursue
Assange's
extradition.
sentence is served after the 50 weeks? I'm trying to remember how many weeks he's been in prison now. This was April last year, April at the beginning of this year. So I guess it's going to be March,
round about March next year.
March
yeah.
next year.
Again, that's another news story that we can look forward to for you know.
So, but it's just our producer was just helping us out there and saying that he will be held on remand because they're not going to give him bail again in case he runs off again. So I guess that might be true.
But it'll be something else to take your mind off of what's happening with Brexit.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
Another
Well-
political tool.
Well, unless the American extradition issue is resolved before that time, then maybe it will get called off. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Who knows? Anyway, moving on to May now. And
Not Mrs. May. but-
well, that is the first item. Having governed with unmatched strength and stability for 2 years,
Strawman stage.
What?
Theresa, I'm trying to finish here
How are you
Having
doing
go-
it with
having-
a straight face?
because I'm a professional. Having governed with unmatched strength and stability for 2 years, Theresa May resigned on May the 24th. Many at the time assumed that things couldn't get much worse. The EU elections were held with Nigel Farage's new Brexit party winning handily across England and even managing 1 seat in Scotland. The SNP won 3 seats for the first time. The Scottish Government declared a climate emergency in the wake of increasingly dire warnings about the threat posed by climate change. Scotland's world-leading targets on climate change have continued to draw international plaudits. The Jeremy Kyle show was cancelled after a guest, Steve Diamond, died just days after appearing on the show. Following on from the deaths of 2 people who had appeared on Love Island, pressure grew on broadcasters and producers to be more conscious of the mental health of people appearing on such reality shows. And in Glasgow, a huge march for independence was organised by All Under One banner. As many as 100,000 people showed their commitment to the cause with the march and an enormous rally on Glasgow Green. So May was certainly a busy month. As I say, May was the end of May. At the end of May.
It's the end of May at the beginning of May.
Well, no, it was the 24th of May. She
Oh, I
resigned,
beg
yeah.
your pardon. Yes, you're right.
So that was the big story. Obviously, 2.5 years as, or just over 2 years, sorry, as the Prime Minister. Theresa May achieved. What were her achievements?
Well, she stalled Brexit for 2 years.
That's a good point.
There
She
was
held it-
actually
held
a
it
bit of
off.
a silence there as you asked
Yeah.
that question.
Her achievements. I
I
had
mean,
to think about
it is a real struggle, isn't it? She took over on what should have been a critical moment.
I think she was the only person who was still standing when the rest of the line took a step backwards when they asked for volunteers to
Yeah.
be Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, during that Tory election, that pretty much was how it happened.
Yeah.
The others all fell down kind of shot in the back of the head by other people. And eventually she was left sort of unelected, but the only one who hadn't had some sort of scandal or, collapse during the
And
campaign.
she pioneered the control of the press, probably after a word in her ear by Boris, but not Boris, by him across the pond there. Trump, who
the old fellow.
controls the press as well. He doesn't like the press, and I'm sure he told her how to handle the press.
Yeah, well,
because
I mean,
they were only allowed to ask questions if she'd approved them, or if
Yeah,
her
I mean,
team
she
had approved
very
them.
rarely spent time in front of the camera, in
Yeah.
front of, just open mics.
That's now become normal for Conservative Party leaders.
Yes, it has.
I mean, but you saw her, like, how just inhuman she was. The
They called her the
and-
robot. if
Yeah,
I
the
remember.
Maybot.
The Maybot.
The Maybot, yes.
Yeah.
That she was
The-
programmed.
The thing that she shot herself in the foot with all the negotiations was the total lack and disregard for any proposals from either Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland with regards to Brexit.
Or even other parties within the Parliament.
Yeah. And what should have actually happened was, to my mind, once Brexit happened, or once that vote was in, it should have been, I don't know, just for argument's sake, 4 people for the Tories, 4 people for Labour, 4 people for the SNP, couple of people for Plaid, couple of people for the DUP, and have just a working group in order to get it through.
Yeah.
And her refusal to do that,
Yes,
has resulted in
the stalemate.
what we've got at this moment in
Yeah, it
time.
would have been impossible for the other parties to shoot it down if they'd been involved in some way from the beginning. But
That's right.
she was just so.
Yeah, but
pig-headed.
She was also the pioneer of the Conservatives' lies, the lying campaign that grew legs. Once she'd gone, Boris Johnson seemed to take it on a few steps further. Do you remember previous prime ministers of whatever hue that were caught lying so blatantly?
Not off the top of my head.
No.
Certainly, the last few years have been amongst the worst I can remember.
And it started with Alistair Carmichael getting away with what he did.
Well,
with
Alistair
Frenchgate.
Carmichael set the benchmark
He
for
did.
lying, and he legitimised it by getting away with it.
Yes.
Because despite being found to have lied in a court of law, and the judge actually said, "You did lie,"
Yes.
he couldn't rule that it was a criminal act because
Yeah.
it was happening in a political
In a
environment,
political-
and therefore Alistair Carmichael then basically said it's okay to lie in politics
Yes.
because this judge says
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And after that,
That's
it
it.
was.
And it
Well,
happened
it's all-
here in
holds were
It's
barred.
open
Scotland.
season, of course. And, yeah.
We're always the guinea pig in Scotland, and that was one of the things that really started.
It was
Well,
an unintended consequence of a crowd-funded legal action against Carmichael for a blatant lie. Not only a lie, but he constructed a fiction
Yes.
which involved a foreign diplomat from France, a high-level diplomat, no
Yeah.
less, and the First Minister of Scotland,
Yes.
and made this lie up and then sold it and expected to get away with it.
Yes.
And it's also something that has been conveniently forgotten by the residents of Orkney and Shetland to this day, because they still return them.
Still returned him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
But-
harking back to what I said
Yeah.
earlier on about
Yeah.
the red wall in the north of England having been punctured, you would have thought out of any constituency, they would have went like that. Look, it was proven that he lied.
Yeah.
So why would we return a known liar? Oh, wait a minute. Because he's been doing the job for so long anyway.
Well-
Let's just not rock the boat.
Speaking of known liars, the EU elections, the Brexit Party won pretty impressively across England, and again managed to somehow wangle a seat in Scotland after the stellar performance of David Coburn over the previous 5 years.
Another Tory.
Yeah, well, no,
Tory turned Brexit.
Worse
Yeah.
than a Tory. He was David Coburn.
I
No,
have to
no, the one that won.
Oh, the one that won this time. Oh,
yes,
yeah,
no,
he
he's
was
a
former
Tory.
Tory. Yeah.
And he lives in France. And he,
That'd be convenient for the.
well,
Getting to
yeah,
Brussels.
yeah, he'll be able to save some money. You
Yeah,
know, the flights
um,
won't be quite so far.
What did we think of that? The three SNP
MEPs.
MEPs was considered quite a victory. It's something the SNP has been just missing for the last couple of elections.
Yeah.
And
not,
then
withstanding the fact that had Scotland won its independence in 2014, would have been looking at 12 MEPs to represent Scotland rather than 3.
Three,
Yeah, you would
yes.
have had a full.
don't make
a
us all
full-
bitter and angry.
Sorry. Can I repeat that again for the benefit of the viewers? Had we been independent, we would have had 12 MEPs to represent Scotland at the European table.
Yes.
Well, it never happened.
Yeah, and we also had this this situation with the Jeremy Kyle show. I thought this was really quite upsetting. I mean, Jeremy Kyle, I've never been a fan of. I don't think he's a
No.
good person. I don't think his show is entertaining. I think it's vulgar and kind of exploitative. But this fella that killed himself just a couple of days after being on the show, these two people that were on Love Island that killed themselves. I mean, is there something wrong? Obviously, this doesn't apply to Broadcasting Scotland, but is there something wrong with the way we're producing TV now? Is this just that where we take the craziest people we can find and put them in the most stressful situation
Well,
we
the
can
Jeremy
find?
Kyle show was just that. It was a fishbowl for people like us to watch what others less, I was going to say less compassionate people would call pure white trash, having a fight in public, washing their dirty laundry in front of the cameras for our entertainment. And when it goes wrong, which it did spectacularly with this young man, Jeremy Kyle was the one who got sacked and his programme was axed.
Yeah.
But that just tells you that risk was there from the beginning. And that they didn't care about that when they wrote that show, when they created that show, that ritual humiliation of people for everyone else's entertainment, that was okay as far as the producers of the programme were concerned. That's something to do with British television and the way that mainstream television understands the audience, what the audience wants.
Yeah,
It's-
but I mean,
it's become like throwing Christians to the lions for the entertainment
exactly
of the
what
it
citizens.
is. Yeah.
Very good
But,
analogy.
I mean, what it seems to me, I've never watched Jeremy Kyle in my life, but it seems to me as it's sensationalism television for the masses, because the masses don't have anything else to do other than veg out in front of the couch or
This gives
on
them a
the
way
couch
of
in front
making
of
a
the
living.
television.
And there's quite a weird thing as well where people still volunteer to go on these shows as well. What do you think is driving
He's
that?
driving that.
The need for attention, usually.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
it's everybody's still searching for the 15 minutes of Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing in defence of Jeremy Kyle, which most people forget about him. Jeremy Kyle started out as an investigative reporter, and he used to go undercover to catch criminals out or con men. And he would actually go in to the places where they were and say, "You're a con man, aren't you? And why are you treating people so badly?" And he got hit a lot. I remember his early programmes. He got assaulted several times for his trouble. But in those days, that kind of television was voyeuristic, but at least there was a moral edge to it. There was a moral reason for doing it. This was entertainment, pure and simple.
Yeah, but this
using
was,
other
this
people's
was, this
misery
was just
for
trying to
entertainment.
replicate something that was happening in American television.
Oh, Americans have done this for years.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it was the British take on it, and it was kind of like sort of like you know, that whole come on down routine, and people would get on the stage, and they would look for the most outrageous.
Something that you would be provocative as
Thing.
well, where there was a chance
yeah.
of a punch up.
Yeah, and not only that, but you know, you weren't just on that show for that show, you were looking to be on that show and then get spoke about the next day in the newspapers.
So you'd
and,
be in the front page.
you know,
of the
and
Times.
then, you know, as we found with the advent of social media and stuff like that.
You can make yourself a star
You can-
based
yeah,
on something
yeah.
quite small.
Yeah,
and
basically.
you can-
You know, I mean, if you look back, out with Kenny, of course, he won't remember,
Okay.
but when you look back to our generation of the new faces and stuff like that, on television, Gordon, don't look at
Opportunity
me
knocks
like
with
you
Hughie
don't.
Green.
We'll leave Hughie Green to one side. He had enough issues in his checkered past. But it was basically people that had been working at that profession. You know,
Yeah,
and
you
the
just
sort of
hadn't
like
got a
coal
break yet.
mine,
Yeah.
In the working men's
social
clubs and
working
all
men's
that
clubs
kind
and
of
all the
things.
rest of it. They'd been knocking their pan in around the country, playing
Yeah.
to 20 or 30 odd people at a Butlins
Yeah.
holiday camp and stuff like that. And then you know you went on
You got a chance
and
to.
you got a
But
chance
that
to
was
shine.
when talent shows actually had talented
Where
people
talent-
in them. Who had worked
now
at it.
now it just seems to be that you know anybody that can hold a note for more than 3 minutes, you know, can be Britain's next diva, and behind it all is money.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's what it is. It's money which swirls around the dark forces of the intranet and through social
Simon
media.
Cowell.
Yeah. Well, you said that. I didn't actually.
He's a lovely man.
Yes.
And just finally, while we're talking about May, how many of us here were at the All Under One Banner March in Glasgow?
Me.
All of us?
No.
Oh, Dave.
I know.
Mate,
Shocking,
you were
God,
Missed
no.
yourself.
You were probably
Sorry.
shearing a sheep or
Yeah,
something
well,
at that
that's
point.
exactly why.
Leave the room now.
Yeah, May
You're
is not the best
you're not
time.
right on board with this, all you know, independence chat. I'm sensing.
Each to his own,
In
and we all
fairness-
have our own ways of contributing.
Yeah, May
on-
is not the best time to ask a sheep farmer
Well,
to come out and do anything.
I'll have my hand up.
Why didn't you come to the one in January the 11th?
How did I?
Why don't you come to the next one in January the
Well,
11th?
this is the one in Edinburgh.
Yeah,
No,
No,
here.
Glasgow.
Glasgow,
That's
next
right.
month.
Well, I might.
Bring the
I
sheep.
might.
Bring the
weather
sheep,
might
swell the
be-
numbers.
Weather might be a tad inclement.
Weather doesn't bother me. It's more the perambulation of my legs.
Yeah. I mean that one the people said 100,000. I mean I suspect it was maybe just a wee bit less than that.
The thing is,
I
people
think that was a
joined
slight
the march.
overestimate.
People joined the march
90.
late on as well, or they left it early on, or there were people already at the assembly point.
I mean,
So it varied a lot.
yeah, I mean
throughout the day.
it was certainly a huge demonstration. I don't remember. I don't remember seeing one much bigger than that
Right,
in my time.
The Edinburgh one apparently was larger in numbers. At least.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
maybe just because I don't know Edinburgh so well. I couldn't.
In
it was
Edinburgh,
harder to
it's
gauge.
much more confined though.
That might be
That
it.
was,
It didn't feel as big to me, but that's
Yeah.
maybe just.
I have
kind
to
of where
say,
I was.
I do seriously admire the people who go on marches and take the time out of their own timetable to do it.
Thanks very much.
No, serious. No, I'm not just saying it. I really do. In fact, I stood up for the marchers at there was a panel discussion I was at down in Ayr somewhere, and some of the audience were saying they weren't very supportive of the marchers, and I said, hang on a minute, and I defended them because they're doing what I should be doing and what others should be
Well,
doing.
the thing is, you're doing what you can do here
Well,
as well.
yeah, we all have different ways of
We all contribute
contributing.
different
Yeah,
ways.
but I mean, it's worthwhile saying that it's not, in sole ownership of all under one banner. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, I've been down at Westminster a couple of times, and there's been, like, massive big marches down there.
Yes.
And in fairness, we should give
Extinction Rebellion and the likes.
the All Under One Banner crew a big shout out.
Thanks,
They
yeah.
Yes,
they have
'cause
done
they-
an incredible job taking these marches all over the country. I mean, there have been wee bits of controversy and wee bits of growing pains.
Well,
but-
they have emerged from that controversy even
but
stronger now.
yeah, well, that's exactly right. They have become a really well-oiled organisation.
But also, I think you should give yourself a pat on the back as
Why is
well
that?
for the extensive coverage done by Broadcasting Scotland
Well,
and Independence
Yes.
Live.
In fairness, I've been almost none of that, but there are people backstage here who have done a huge job. They have Broadcasting Scotland has been at every single one of the All Under One banner marches, which is
good.
more than can be said for the BBC or STV or Radio Scotland or any other any of the newspapers.
Which is why I would love to get onto my Bob Geldof bit and ask people to give us some money.
Well,
and
we will
keep
be
the
doing
venture
that in
going.
just a couple of minutes.
We'll be yelling out
Yeah,
at the
because
end
it's
of the
vital
show.
that people know that these marches are A, happening, B, they're getting the coverage. You know, if they want to watch the full march,
Yeah.
And again, these
Then-
enormous attendances as
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
but then as opposed to what you're getting on the right-wing media is a cursory glance to the fact that a few thousand independent supporters amassed in George Square at the weekend there, and then it moves on to, you know, somebody shooting squirrels in their country garden, allegedly.
There's one,
You got that in quickly.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
One thing I wanted to make a point about was that when people are talking about these marches not being covered by the mainstream media, I would just encourage people to say to their relatives, look out your window today. Never mind what you read in the newspaper, look out the window and look at all these thousands of people milling down your street. Why do you
Calmly
think
and
that's,
happily,
why is that not on
peacefully.
the television?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
as soon as people see reality, then they know they're being lied to or things are being hidden from them, unless they look outside their front door.
But the other side of the coin as well, and it should be pointed out that, you know, and the narrative these days, I've heard a few MPs now saying that it's up to Boris Johnson to qualify his
Yes.
union to us. Right, now if we had, just say for argument's sake, 100,000 people on the streets, if there was 100,000 people on the streets for unionism,
Yeah.
then I would say, okay, I accept that you've got a legitimate argument to make because you've amassed the
All this
same amount
support,
of people as, you know, are on my side, so therefore I'm willing to have a discussion.
Yes.
But
Whereas as
see
it
when you
is-
turn up with 40 folk and you're paying them £20 a time to, you know, wave a butcher's apron, I'm just not going to give you the time of day, so, you know, toddle on.
Well,
And you haven't even got a clean jacket on,
well, there's that as well.
But,
Allegedly.
allegedly.
I'd like to take us back to the other famous Orangeman for a minute, Donald Trump.
oh, sorry, I thought you were going to talk about King William.
No, Donald Trump is actually orange. Yeah, I remember my son once asked me why Donald Trump's eyes were white when the rest of his skin was orange.
Yeah.
I said he wears goggles in the sun. Anyway,
I saw a great.
Allegedly.
Just before we go on, I saw a great joke. It's a picture of Donald Trump saying, "Don't say I'm orange, I'm peach."
Soon to be
impeached.
impeached.
Well,
exactly.
speaking of Mr. Trump, okay. During June this year, Donald Trump arrived in the UK for a state visit and he was met with waves of protest. Most memorably, Trump was said to be irritated by the giant balloon of a petulant baby Trump flying over London. I was actually surprised that he didn't take that as a sign of welcome. You know, he tends to sort of take a positive view of crowds most of the time. Anyway, with that out of the way, Theresa May was finally able to step down as leader of the Tories, and the campaign to replace her began. Influential Scottish Tory leader Ruth Davidson immediately threw her weight behind Sajid Javid and reportedly began behind-the-scenes campaigns to prevent Boris Johnson from winning. Meanwhile, in sport, Scotland attended the FIFA World Cup for, well, what was a somewhat disappointing tournament, just getting to get to a major tournament, and in the finals was a big victory for the team, and their glorious failure still better than the men have managed to do for a long time. Now this, we'll come back to the women's football in a minute, but
Yeah.
I would like to talk about the giant inflatable orange baby for a minute.
You're a
Because
sadistic man.
because the Donald, as he is sometimes known, was. I'm not sure whether Mrs. May really took to Donald or not, but he seemed to take to her. And do you remember the time they were seen holding hands as they
Oh, it
walked
was
down?
very touchy-feely, wasn't it?
Yes, allegedly Mr. Trump said that he was disoriented by sloping surfaces and would often need a hand to steady him when he walked down a ramp. He was okay jumping down the steps of a helicopter, apparently.
Yeah.
but Needed a wee bit of a hand to walk down a slightly sloping surface. So he seemed to be very touchy-feely with Mrs. May.
And we were all really worried that he might extend that to our Queen.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he
Well-
was not exactly respectful to the Queen.
No.
There's a couple of clips of him just like walking in front of her, and getting in
the
her
changing
way.
of the
and-
guard thing. Mm.
And you think, you know, I mean, I have no particular brief for the royal family or the Queen, but
But the
there are
etiquette of
there are
it.
ways of doing things, you know.
Yes.
And you'd think somebody might have said to him, "Look, mate, this is the Queen. You need to do things a certain way."
Well, you are not allowed to turn your back to the Queen
No.
when you're in her presence.
Well,
you have to reverse out of the room even, bowing obsequiously as you go.
As a confirmed Republican, I wouldn't have been there in the first place. You know, she is not my Queen. You know, I believe that the Scottish people are sovereign. You know, therefore it renders her she is not. And when we're independent, I will be turning up at her door with a rent book, asking her, you know, to pay her way.
Yes, bring the bailiffs with you.
Indeed, you know.
This Balmoral you've got here,
I
you
don't-
paid council
honestly,
tax on this.
I don't honestly see there is an awful lot of chat about, you know, once she pops her mortal coil, shall we say, that there needs to be a trimming down of the royal family. Listen, you're not going to tell me that in 100 years tourists are still not going to ramp up to the gates of Buckingham Palace whether there's a royal in there or not, and you're still going to charge the same amount of money. Right, so, you know, having a royal family is like, you know, is a complete oxymoron to me. Do you know what I mean? It's an outdated thing. It's a seat of privilege in a country of inequality, where you've got people relying on food banks, and yet, you know, these people are getting their houses fixed for nothing, you know, courtesy of the taxpayers. They're able to, you know, get hoovered into Parliament in order to deliver a speech that she didn't bloody write in the first place. And with all this pomp and ceremony going on, you know, we could have, you know, just dispense with all that and get down to the meat and two veg. But you know, this is the country's in a crisis.
I remain
time.
convinced, Chris, that the whole problem with it's not just in England. There are royal worshippers in Scotland as well who cannot let go of the royal family. It's this desire to have some kind of fairy tale, some kind of prince and princess and king and queen fairy tale going on in this grey, drab life that they lead.
Well, I was watching
That
Shrek
they
Forever
have to
After before I came out. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that's just about, you know, that is the some point of my royalistic tendencies.
Do you think behind closed doors they all turn into ogres as well?
Do you know, I wouldn't be surprised. I had a friend of mine, again, he was the branch convener of Eastwood. He used to be a footman, James Mills, and some of the stories he would tell you had your hair standing in the back of your head. You know, taking tea to Prince Philip, and you know, and you had to wait to the precise time of the
shut the door
watch,
to
and
the
then
second.
shut the door, and you know, and stuff like that. He went in a couple of times and thought the poor bugger was dead.
There's
You
even
know,
there's even an
it was
approved
just about
method
to ring a
for
bell.
bowing.
Aye, but it was just about to ring a bell, and then all of a sudden Philip moved over. And it was, oh God, had he have pressed that bell and it was the wrong call, he'd have been out in his,
door.
I must be one of the very few people, or maybe the only person in this studio, who has actually shook hands with Prince Philip in Buckingham Palace, I might add.
There we go,
When I was 15.
What had you done?
I won an award when I was 15.
Oh, well done.
Did you?
Peter
What did you
Badge
win?
Or something like that.
Oh, it was a school's design award thing that I won when I was at school. You know,
Is that the Duke of Edinburgh's award?
Yeah,
thing?
I got. No. This
No?
was GEC, General Electric Company, sponsored this school's design award,
Right.
and the Design Council sponsored it. And there was umpteen teams from all over the UK.
Yes,
So there were 6 winners, and I never expected to win anything at all.
Yeah.
But long story short, I won this award, and it was a sizable amount of money involved, and a scroll, and I have a trip to Buckingham Palace, and a wee appearance on Tomorrow's World. Do you remember that? Yeah, that was me back in the day.
That was the start of this.
1977. That
The
was.
start of this ongoing high-profile media career that you've established here.
Yes, it
That's where it all
started then.
started.
Yeah, Duke of Edinburgh was the one that kicked it off.
The most I ever got was a blessing off of Pope Johannes Paolo and Bella Houston.
Good for you.
There was only 3 of us representing the whole trip.
Really?
Because, you know, I hate to be controversial, folks, but there was only 3 Catholics in the actual trip. The rest of them were all
Well-
do you know what I mean? But we turned up, you know, just to...
How did we
keep
get
the
onto
old
this subject?
15th Glasgow of Eaglesham going.
I wish I knew, Gordon.
Well, I wanted to bring it back to Scotland's other favourite subject, which is football, but one which doesn't usually draw, gasps of amazement and astonishment.
But
World
World
Cup.
discuss Ruth Davison and Sandy
Oh
Javid.
no! We want to discuss football success for a change. The Scottish women's team getting qualified for the World Cup for the first time.
Yeah.
Any Scottish team has qualified for the World Cup in
Since
donkey's years.
20 years. Yeah.
And it was the first time a Scottish women's team had competed at that level, and I thought this is a major triumph for such a small country with such a young sport in terms of female participation.
Yeah.
But having watched the women playing football, the quality of the football is actually a lot better, in my opinion anyway,
More
than the
skillful.
men's game. In many ways, there's a lot less contact and a lot more skill. The men tend to muscle each other out the way, and there's lots of head injuries and gesticulating and diving. Not so much with the women's team. It was played a lot.
Apart from one.
There was one,
Wasn't there?
yes.
Yeah. But not one of ours.
No. And
Can't
I
remember
was
which country she
very,
came from, but-
very pleasantly surprised as a man who's watched football for many years. And I would actually, in many cases, given the opportunity, rather go and watch a women's game of football now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I hope will have come out of the World
Yes.
Cup, is that people do start going to women's games. I mean, there
drawing
are
huge
several
crowds now.
teams
Yeah.
that are now, you know, the Scottish League is starting to get a wee bit better. I think there are now a handful of female players getting paid in Scotland. I believe there are a handful of professionals.
Won't be equal pay, of course.
Of course, not even close. I think we're probably a long way off that. But you know,
Clever
it's-
how you dragged that back
it's,
there.
it's become such a big deal in the States. The English Women's League is doing really well.
Good.
It's about time, I think, that Scotland did catch up a wee bit.
Well,
Yep.
the Glasgow City play in, I think it's Keppoch Hill or something like that.
Up at Keppoch Hill Road.
Keppoch Hill Road,
East end of Glasgow.
and I think you've got maybe
Springburn.
you know average of between I think it's sort of like 600 to 900 people watching.
Yeah.
You know, and actually, you know, going and
That's a
stuff
crowd
like that.
at Partick, by the way.
That's a crowd at Partick, in days gone past. But I think the platform, again, Hannah Burdell raised this actually because she was right behind all the women. She went to all the games and stuff like that. Nicola went to one as well. But you know, they were put out. You know, it wasn't on BBC. Mainstream, it was BBC Scotlandshire. You
A
know,
lot of Scottish lower
BBC
league football
Alba.
is carried by Alba.
Aye,
Alba.
Alba.
Yes. And actually the coverage is excellent.
Yeah.
Aye, oh no, yeah, but what I'm saying is the fact that it wasn't UK wide. So if it's not UK wide, they're not getting that again. You know, you're asking a socialist about corporate money and stuff like that. And
The
all
other
that.
thing is, when it comes to football, there's no UK.
Well,
There's no United Kingdom in football. It's all individual countries.
oh, of course it is. Aye. But it is worth to say.
Which is why Match of the Day is UK wide.
Oh, yes.
But there is,
Yes, it is.
6. I think there's at least half a dozen, as you say, the women
Professionals.
who are playing for the likes of Manchester United and
Yep.
Chelsea and.
Well, this is
you
what
know,
happens.
they are
It's the
high-profile
historic
players.
problem of Scottish football. The talent migrates to the English league 'cause there's more money there.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to look at some of the most talented
It's where the
Scottish
television.
managers.
Well, it's where the television
where
money
all
has
the-
gone.
Well,
Yeah.
again,
Sadly.
that's a whole different subject for a whole different
Yes,
evening,
perhaps.
Gordon.
And of course, I'm quite sure that independence would transform the whole structure of television,
Yes.
media, sport, all these things.
We might get paid, Kenny.
Well, that's something I was just about to come to. That is our rediscussion about the first half of the year. We will have the second half of the year before the end of the year. We will come back to you to talk about that. But at this time, we do have to ask, as we always do, if you can afford to help us. We have been, as you know, we've upgraded the studio here. We've upgraded some of our equipment. We've had more people coming in to get involved. But we are still very, 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 very short of money here. It costs a lot of money to have a lease on the studio, to run the lights, to run our internet connection. All of these things cost a lot of money. And in order to make a television station work, we need all of it. And we are in a position now where we really need money. As Chris was saying, it is getting a wee bit to the Bob Geldof stage where we're just wanting to thump the table and tell us to give us your effing money.
Oh, please, yeah, I'm all for
we have-
I'm all for
It's
rattling
worth
the table.
saying that we have at the moment just over half the number of supporters that we actually need. We need over 500 of you.
Yeah.
Right now, we need donations, really, to keep the wolf from the door as well.
Could
as
I also point out as well, the producer told me tonight that we've got about 10,000 followers on Twitter,
Yes.
but we've only got about 500 people donating.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
something
we
to
haven't
that
got
effect.
500, we've got 264
200
at the moment.
Sorry, I was trying to be generous.
Who are actually paid.
Yeah, but you know, if those
need
10,000
500.
followers just chipped in a
A
tenner,
couple of quid each, we'd
would
be
make all the
laughing.
you
difference.
know,
Yeah.
because it's a fantastic medium, and you know, the thing that gets me, honestly, from a personal point of view, is the fact that you get independence people bemoaning the BBC and all the rest
For
of
not
it,
covering
and
things.
and they've got a platform here. They just need to, you know,
Support
have a
it.
bit of belief in it,
Well, to-
and you know, and share it around, and you know, and hey, you know,
To go back to what we were saying earlier, we are not connected to Fox. We're not connected to Rupert Murdoch. We will not lie to you. We will never produce a show anything like the Jeremy Kyle show. And if we have enough money, we will happily broadcast women's football in prime time on the main channel.
Yeah.
That's what we would love to be able to do. That is, I mean, that is genuinely the level of ambition here. Is we want to be Scotland's real national broadcaster, but we can't do that without your support. So if you can, please go to broadcastingscotland.scot. I'm sorry, I'm further away than I used to be. Please
Studio's too
go to
big for you,
broadcastingscotland.scot/donate. It's this giant new table we've got.
Yes.
Please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/donate. I know that a couple of days before Christmas is the wrong time to ask, but any money that you can afford to put into Broadcasting Scotland will make a huge difference. We need tens of thousands of pounds in order to keep this thing up and running. So please, please do go and support us if you can. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Gordon very much for the co-host tonight. Day, thank you again for coming in. Chris, thank you for coming in with
absolute pleasure.
your far left perspectives from my far right.
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting in the most oddest position this evening.
What, he's on the left
But
of
you
the
do
screen.
appear far left on screen. See, that's the magic of television. But that is all we've got for you before Christmas. So do have a wonderful Christmas. We will be back just after Christmas. We'll talk about the rest of the year, and we'll be back again as normal with the full Scottish on Sunday. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Christmas, and we'll see you soon.
Well, no one in Scotland can commission an idea. You know, if I went to BBC Scotland and I said, oh, I've got this great idea for a sitcom, I've got this brilliant idea for a drama, you know, there isn't one person in Scotland that can okay it unless it goes through London.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Full Scottish. What's happening today?
Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
That need, that desire for independence is ever stronger than perhaps it was in 2014. So there's an obligation that we've got to give leadership to that campaign. That's what Nicola Sturgeon, as our First Minister, has been doing.
My feeling about Boris Johnson is he can't be trusted on anything.
That is now and forever will be known as the rape clause.
I'm old enough to remember going into Europe in '73, and I remember how much of a razor's edge that was a battling stone. And I think we made it by 53%, if I remember correctly, for going in. And ever since that time, England particularly has been pretty much schizophrenic, down the middle about whether it felt British or whether it felt European. And that schism, that crack has remained throughout English society ever since.
Scotland means business. Scotland's voice won't be stilled, it won't be silenced, it has to be heard.
The work that's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.